Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Diaz-Balart. All time yielded during consideration of the rule is for debate only. I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the rule provides for consideration of H.R. 4213, the Tax Extenders Act of 2009. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill except those arising under Clause 9 and 10 of Rule 21 and against the bill itself. The rule provides that the previous question shall be considered as ordered without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate for one motion to recommit with or without instructions. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule to assist American families and small businesses with needed tax relief in a time when American citizens and American small businesses are beginning to turn the corner. The rule will allow us to bring legislation to the House floor later today that will not only strengthen our economy by directing tax relief to middle-class families and creating jobs for small businesses, but will also do this in a deficit-neutral, fiscally responsible way. Since being elected to Congress, I have repeatedly voted along with my colleagues to cut taxes for middle-class families and small businesses. In doing so, we have upheld our pledge to the American people, and I have kept the promise I made to my constituents to provide much-needed tax relief and incentives for economic growth. I know that there are many families and businesses in my district that are struggling in the current economic crisis with rising costs of everyday items, including food, gas, and health care. This legislation and the rule behind it provides for consideration will extend a number of critical tax relief measures that are relied upon by middle-class families and small businesses to improve the quality of life and strengthen our economy. I am aware that we face harsh realities in addressing the current economic crisis. While these are challenging times, we simply cannot endlessly borrow our way out of this situation. The legislation we will consider under the rule strikes the necessary balance between continuing the tax incentives that will help families and businesses continue to improve their position, while offsetting the cost of extending these provisions by tightening tax compliance and making common sense changes to the tax treatment of compensation paid to hedge fund managers. This change applies to investment fund managers, the same rule that applies to real estate agents, waiters, and CEO stock options. In doing so, we will extend $30 billion of expiring temporary tax provisions through 2010, including the existing deductions for tuition expenses, the research and development tax credit, and the state and local property tax deduction, among others, and we will do so without increasing the deficit and without any additional borrowing. The American people understand the idea of pay-go, that Congress should have to balance its books just as they do. Mr. Speaker, the House of Representatives continues to show a strong commitment to the pay-as-you-go rule adopted in January of 2007. I applaud my Blue Dog colleagues for their outspoken leadership on pay-go, and I am proud that the House has passed legislation that would create statutory pay-go. All of the incentives that are included in this package will expire at the end of the year unless Congress acts to extend them. It is vitally important that these tax incentives are extended in order to maintain the economic recovery that has slowly started to take hold in this country. The legislation extenders creates important tax credits for individuals. It extends the deduction for tuition and education expenses, helping families send their children to college. It continues to allow teachers to claim a credit of up to $250 for out-of-pocket purchase of classroom supplies to better educate our children, and it extends the increased standard deduction for state and local property taxes so that working families can keep more of their hard-earned dollars for other necessities during these tough economic times. The legislation includes an extension of several provisions important to business, including the credit for a company's R&D expenditures. Extending research and development credit is vital to ensuring that American companies remain competitive and on the cutting edge of innovation. This credit is of particular interest to the area of New York that I represent because its extension will further the expansion of the microchip fabrication and nanotechnology industries which are beginning to blossom in upstate New York. In the past, the R&D tax credit has lapsed and Congress has had to retroactively extend it. American companies rely on this credit and upon it continuing to adequately, so that they can adequately plan for their long-term research projects. I support this proactive extension to provide that continuing, and I will continue to work for a much-needed permanent extension that would eliminate concerns for further expirations and lapses. The bill also extends expiring measures to address the drop in charitable giving that has been caused by the current state of our economy. It does so by extending deductions for charitable contributions of real property, food inventories, books, and computer equipment. The bill allows tax-free charitable contributions from an IRA account of up to $100,000 per taxpayer per year. When I speak with constituents who work and volunteer their valuable time with not-for-profit organizations, they tell me this is more important than ever today with our struggling economy. These provisions help those organizations continue to provide the assistance to those in need, which is particularly important today. Supporting this rule and the tax relief legislation we will consider later today is simple and common sense. We can provide tax relief and incentives to middle-class families, spur innovation, retain and create jobs, reduce our dependence on oil from hostile nations, and reduce greenhouse gases. And we can do it all in a fiscally responsible manner. Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to support this rule and the underlying legislation. Thank you, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman